He had everything money could buy, but lived surrounded by a silent emptiness, until a shy child and her mother crossed his door, bringing life where before there had only been loneliness. And he discovered in the simple affection of a child the strength to reinvent his own story. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The Upper East Side penthouse overlooking Central Park had everything money could buy, except warmth. Robert Kensington stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Manhattan's skyline glitter in the fading twilight. At 54, he had amassed a fortune that made him one of New York's financial titans. His investment, firm Kensington Capital, was feared and respected in equal measure on Wall Street. To the business world, he was a legend. To those who had faced his ruthless tactics, he was a monster. But in the cavernous silence of his penthouse, he was merely a man alone. Robert adjusted his perfectly tailored suit and checked his watch, a rare Patek Philippe that cost more than what most people earned in a year. The cleaning service would arrive soon. Mrs. Thompson, his stern housekeeper, who had managed his domestic affairs for 15 years, had informed him that they had assigned a new person to his residence after the previous cleaner had quit without notice. "I've made it clear that your privacy is non-negotiable, Mr. Kensington," Mrs. Thompson had assured him earlier that day. "They understand the rules." The rules were simple. No noise, no intrusions, no personal questions. Robert's home was his sanctuary from a world that constantly demanded pieces of him. Here, in his fortress of solitude, he controlled everything. The elevator chimed softly. Robert retreated to his home office, closing the heavy oak door behind him. From his desk, he could monitor the security feeds on his computer, a habit born of paranoia and power. He watched as Mrs. Thompson greeted a slender woman in a simple uniform. Elena Morales, according to the file he had requested. 32. Years old, excellent references, 5 years with the cleaning service. What the file hadn't mentioned was the small figure clutching Elena's hand, a girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, with dark curls and large, watchful eyes. Robert frowned and picked up his phone. "Mrs. Thompson, there appears to be a child in my home." "Yes, sir. Ms. Morales explained that her babysitter cancelled last minute. She assured me the girl would remain quiet and out of the way. I told her it was highly irregular, but she seemed desperate to keep the job." Robert considered sending them away immediately. Children were unpredictable, noisy, messy, everything his carefully ordered existence stood against. "It's just for today," Mrs. Thompson added. She promised to make other arrangements going forward. "Fine," Robert said curtly, "but ensure they understand the consequences of disturbing me." He watched Eleanor kneel before the little girl, whispering instructions. The child nodded solemnly, clutching a worn cloth doll to her chest. Something about her solemn expression stirred a distant memory in Robert, but he pushed it away, returning to the quarterly reports demanding his attention. 2 hours passed in focused silence. Occasionally, Robert would glance at the security feed, tracking Elena's efficient movements through his home. The girl remained in the corner of the kitchen, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her doll. She was remarkably still for a child. Her age, occasionally flipping through a tattered picture book or whispering to her doll. When hunger finally pulled him from his work, Robert ventured to the kitchen. He hadn't expected them to still be there, but Elena was carefully polishing the marble countertops. She startled when he entered, nearly dropping her cloth. "Mr. Kensington, I'm sorry, we're almost finished." "It's fine," he said dismissively, opening the refrigerator. As he reached for a container of prepared food, he felt eyes on him. The little girl was watching him with undisguised curiosity. "Lily, remember what I said," Elena whispered urgently. "Don't stare." "It's okay, Mummy," the girl replied in a small voice. "He just looks sad." Robert froze, container in hand. No one had commented on his emotional state in years. His employees feared him too much, and he had no friends to speak of. The last person who had truly known him had been his mother, and she had been gone for over 20 years. "I apologize, Mr. Kensington," Elena said, her face flushed with embarrassment. Lily sometimes speaks without thinking. Robert nodded stiffly and returned to his office with his meal, disturbed by the child's observation. How could she see sadness where others saw only power and intimidation? He had spent decades cultivating an impenetrable exterior, yet this child had pierced it with a single glance. When they left an hour later, Robert found himself reviewing the security footage. The little girl, Lily, had paused at his aquarium, pressing her small hand against the glass as the exotic fish swam by. Her face had lit up with wonder, and for a moment Robert saw himself at age 6, visiting the aquarium with his mother, back when joy came easily and the world seemed full of possibility. The next day, Robert was surprised to find Lily had returned with her mother. Mrs. Thompson approached him apologetically. Ms. Morales' regular childcare arrangement has fallen through. She has requested permission to bring her daughter temporarily while she makes other arrangements. I told her it was unlikely you would agree, but— It's fine, Robert interrupted, surprising himself as much as Mrs. Thompson. As long as they maintain the same standards of silence. Mrs. Thompson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. Very well, sir. For the next week, Robert found himself increasingly aware of the small presence in his home, though he rarely left his office. During their visits, he found himself checking the security feeds more frequently. Lily was unfailingly quiet, but there was a vibrancy to her stillness, a contained energy that somehow made his vast apartment feel less empty. On the 7th day, Robert emerged from his office to find Lily standing alone in front of his grand piano, a Steinway concert grand that he had purchased at auction but never played. Her small hand hovered above the keys, not touching, just wondering. "Do you play?" he asked, startling her. Lily shook her head, dark curls bouncing. "No, sir. But it's the prettiest thing I've ever seen." Robert approached slowly as one might a wild animal. "It's a Steinway Model D, the same kind they use in concert halls. Can it make happy music and sad music?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes, I suppose it can." "My teacher says music is how feelings sound." Lily looked up at him with those disconcerting eyes. "What does your music sound like, Mr. Kensington?" Before he could formulate a response, Elena appeared in the doorway, her face tight with anxiety. "Lily, I'm so sorry, Mr. Kensington. She knows she's supposed to stay in the kitchen." "She wasn't disturbing me," Robert said, surprising himself again. That night, long after they had gone, Robert sat at the piano for the first time since its purchase. His fingers found the keys hesitantly, remembering lessons from childhood, lessons he had abandoned when his father deemed them a frivolous distraction from business studies. The melody that emerged was halting, imperfect, but unmistakably melancholic. "What does your music sound like?" The child's question echoed in his mind as his hands moved across the keys, giving voice to the silence that had defined his existence for so long. The following morning, Robert woke with an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He dismissed it as indigestion, forcing himself through his exercise routine despite the discomfort. By afternoon, when the pain had intensified, he reluctantly called his private physician for an appointment. 3 days and countless tests later, Robert sat in Dr. Harrison Wells's office, listening as his world collapsed around him. "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," Dr. Wells explained gently. "It's a condition where the heart muscle becomes abnormally thick, making it harder for your heart to pump blood. In your case, it appears to be quite advanced." "What's the treatment?" Robert asked, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. Dr. Wells's expression was grave. "There are medications that can help manage symptoms, but given the severity and progression, without a transplant, your prognosis is concerning." "How concerning?" "Months, possibly a year with aggressive treatment." Robert left Dr. Wells's office in a daze, declining his driver's offer to pick him up. Instead, he walked aimlessly through the streets of Manhattan, the doctor's words echoing in his mind. A year at most, perhaps only months. The mighty Robert Kensington, who had built an empire through sheer force of will, reduced to a failing organ and a ticking clock. The crisp autumn air cut through his cashmere coat, but he barely felt it. For the first time since his mother's passing, Robert felt utterly vulnerable. He had spent decades accumulating wealth and power, believing they would shield him from life's uncertainties. Now, staring into the abyss of his own mortality, he realized how hollow that protection had been. Without conscious direction, his feet carried him to a small park near the East River. The place was nearly deserted in the fading afternoon light. Robert sank onto a bench overlooking the water, his composure finally crumbling. Hot tears streaked down his face, tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed since he was a young man. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as years of suppressed emotion broke through the carefully constructed dam. So absorbed was he in his grief that he didn't notice the small figure approaching until a tiny hand touched his cheek. Robert looked up, startled to find Lily standing before him, her face etched with concern. Behind her, Eleanor rushed forward, her expression a mixture of shock and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Kensington," she stammered. "Lily, come back here right now." But the child ignored her mother, her eyes fixed on Robert's tear-streaked face. With gentle determination, she reached up again and wiped a tear from his cheek. "It's okay to be sad sometimes," she said, with the simple wisdom of childhood. "My mommy says tears clean the heart." Something broke inside Robert then, not the shattering of grief, but the crumbling of a wall he had spent decades fortifying. Without thinking, he reached out and took Lily's small hand in his own. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Elena stood frozen, clearly unsure how to navigate this unexpected encounter with her intimidating employer. "We were just... Lily likes to feed the ducks here after we finish work." Robert nodded, releasing Lily's hand and attempting to compose himself. "Please, don't let me interrupt your routine." He expected them to hurry away, but instead, Lily turned to her mother with pleading eyes. "Can Mr. Kensington feed the ducks with us? He looks like he needs duck friends." Elena's face flushed. "Lily, Mr. Kensington is a very busy man. I'm sure he has important things to do." Actually, Robert found himself saying, "I have nowhere to be." The surprise on Elena's face was evident, but she nodded cautiously. "If you're sure..." They walked to the water's edge, where a small group of mallards paddled hopefully toward them. Lily produced a paper bag of stale bread crusts from her pocket and solemnly offered some to Robert. "You have to throw little pieces," she instructed seriously. "If they're too big, the little ducks don't get any." Robert followed her directions, feeling strangely self-conscious under the child's watchful gaze. When he successfully attracted a duck with his offering, Lily's face broke into a radiant smile that transformed her entire being. "See, they like you," she exclaimed triumphantly. For the next 20 minutes, Robert Kensington, feared Titan of Wall Street, stood beside a child and her mother, tossing bread crusts to ducks. The simplicity of the activity, so far removed from the complexity of his usual existence, felt oddly restorative. As the bread ran out and the ducks dispersed, Robert checked his watch. "It's getting late. May I offer you a ride home?" Elena hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "That's very kind, but we don't want to impose..." "Please," Robert interrupted. "It's getting cold, and I'd like to do something useful today." The ride to Elena's apartment in Queens was initially awkward. Lily, however, seemed immune to the tension, gazing wide-eyed at the luxurious interior of Robert's town car and peppering the driver with questions that he answered with surprising patience. When they arrived at a modest apartment building in Astoria, Robert was struck by the contrast between this neighborhood and his own. Here, children played on the sidewalks, while neighbors called to each other from open windows. Life happened communally, visibly, the opposite of his isolated existence. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Kensington," Eleanor said as the car stopped. "And I apologize again for earlier." "There's no need," Robert replied. "Your daughter has a kind heart. You should be proud." Lily beamed at the compliment. "Can we feed the ducks with you again sometime?" Before Elena could intervene, Robert found himself nodding. "I'd like that." He watched them walk into their building, Lily skipping alongside her mother, turning once to wave enthusiastically. Something stirred in Robert's chest, not the physical pain that had become his constant companion, but a different sensation. all together, something like warmth. The following day, Robert surprised Mrs. Thompson by emerging from his office when Elena and Lily arrived. "I'd like Ms. Morales to clean my study today," he announced. "I'll work in the living room." If Mrs. Thompson found this deviation from his ironclad routine unusual, she hid it well. "Of course, sir." Robert settled at the dining table with his laptop, positioning himself with a clear view of Lily, who had established her usual quiet corner in the kitchen. Today, she was coloring in a worn activity book, her tongue caught between her teeth, in concentration. After half an hour of pretending to work while stealing glances at the child, Robert cleared his throat. "Lily, would you like to see the fish?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide with excitement. "The pretty ones in the big glass house?" "The aquarium, yes." He gestured toward it. "You can get closer if you'd like." Lily looked to the kitchen where her mother was working, then back to Robert. "Is it okay? Mommy says I shouldn't touch anything." "It's okay, just don't—" "Tap on the glass. It scares them." With careful steps, Lily approached the massive aquarium that served as a living wall between the dining area and one of the sitting rooms. Inside, dozens of tropical fish in brilliant colors navigated around. Elaborate coral structures and swaying plants. "They're like swimming rainbows," Lily whispered, her face bathed in the blue glow from the tank. Robert moved to stand beside her. "That orange and white one is a clownfish like in the movie, and the blue one with the yellow tail is a regal tang." "What's that one? The flat one that looks like it's flying?" "That's a stingray, a blue-spotted ribbon-tail ray, to be precise. They're related to sharks." Lily's eyes widened. "He lives with sharks?" "No sharks in this tank," Robert assured her. "They wouldn't get along with the others. Like how Tommy Wilson doesn't get along with anyone at school." Lily nodded sagely. "Mrs. Peterson says he needs to learn to share his feelings instead of pushing people." Robert couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. Perhaps Tommy and sharks have that in common. For the next hour, Robert found himself giving an impromptu marine biology lesson, drawing on knowledge acquired during the aquarium's installation, but never shared with anyone. Lily proved to be an attentive student, asking thoughtful questions that sometimes caught him off guard with their perceptiveness. When Eleanor emerged from the study, she froze at the sight of her daughter, deep in conversation with Robert Kensington. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kensington. I hope she hasn't been bothering you." "Not at all," Robert replied. "She's been helping me name the fish." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "The stingray is Pancake, and the yellow fish with the spots is Sunshine, and the grumpy one that hides in the cave is Mr. Grumbles." Eleanor's face relaxed into a tentative smile. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart." As they prepared to leave, Robert made an impulsive decision. "Ms. Morales, I understand your childcare situation remains difficult. If it would help, Lily is welcome to spend time here while you work. Mrs. Thompson could keep an eye on her." Elena's surprise was evident. "That's extremely generous, Mr. Kensington, but I couldn't impose—" "It's not an imposition," Robert interrupted. "This apartment has more space than we know what to do with, and—" He hesitated. "I've enjoyed Lily's company." After they left, Robert sat in his silent penthouse, reflecting on the strange turn his life had taken. A week ago, his days had been structured around meetings, deals, and the relentless pursuit of more. Now, diagnosed with a failing heart, he found himself looking forward to the company of a child who named Fish and believed in sharing feelings. That night, Robert made another impulsive decision. He called Dr. Wells. "I'd like to discuss treatment options," he said without preamble. "The transplant, what are the odds?" "Approximately 30% success rate, given the complexity of your case," Dr. Wells replied. "It's a risky procedure, Robert, but it's also your best chance." "Schedule the necessary tests," Robert said. "I want to be on that list." When he hung up, Robert walked to the window overlooking the glittering city. For the first time since receiving his diagnosis, he felt something stir within him, something that felt dangerously like hope. Over the next few weeks, a subtle transformation took place in the Kensington penthouse. The silence that had once filled every corner began to recede, replaced by the gentle sounds of life. Lily's presence brought an energy that seemed to brighten even the most austere rooms, her imagination transforming ordinary objects into extraordinary treasures. The arrangement had evolved naturally. Eleanor continued her cleaning duties, but Lily now spent her afternoons in Robert's company, instead of sitting quietly in a corner. Mrs. Thompson had initially watched this development with thinly veiled suspicion, but even her stern demeanor had softened at the sight of her employer naming fish with a 6-year-old. "Lily tells me you played the piano for her yesterday," Elena said, as she dusted the bookshelves in Robert's study. Her tone was conversational, but her eyes held a question. Robert nodded, not looking up from his laptop. "She asked about it. I played a little Chopin. She hasn't stopped talking about it. She told me it was like Happy Rain." Eleanor paused. "I didn't know you were a musician." "I'm not," Robert replied. "Just something I learned as a child." The truth was more complicated. Music had been his first love, his private joy, until his father had deemed it a distraction from the family business. The piano in his penthouse had been an act of defiance, a promise to himself that one day he would reclaim that part of his soul. Instead, it had gathered dust, a monument to dreams, deferred, until Lily had asked to hear it sing. A small cough escaped him and he pressed a hand to his chest. The pain had been increasing lately, despite the medications Dr. Wells had prescribed. He had another appointment tomorrow to discuss his place on the transplant list. "Are you all right, Mr. Kensington?" Elena asked, concern evident in her voice. "Just tired," he lied, forcing a reassuring smile. "And please call me Robert. Mr. Kensington makes me feel like my father." Elena's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "Robert, then." From the living room came the sound of Lily's laughter, followed by Mrs. Thompson's uncharacteristically gentle response. The housekeeper had taken to showing Lily how to fold napkins into elaborate shapes, a skill from her earlier days, working in luxury hotels. "Your daughter has quite a gift," Robert said, changing the subject. "She sees the world differently than most people." Elena's expression softened. "She always has. Even as a baby, she noticed everything. Sometimes I think she feels things more deeply than the rest of us." "That's a rare quality," Robert observed. "Most people spend their lives learning to feel less, not more." "Like you." The words slipped out before Eleanor could stop them, and her hand flew to her mouth. "I'm sorry, that was completely inappropriate." But Robert wasn't offended. If anything, he felt seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and strangely liberating. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "like me." Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. A moment of understanding that transcended their vastly different lives. Then Lily burst into the study, breaking the spell. "Look what Mrs. Thompson taught me." "She," exclaimed, proudly displaying an origami swan. "She says if I make 1,000, I get to make a wish that comes true." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Elena said, quickly resuming her dusting. 1,000 is a lot," Robert commented, examining the paper creation. "What wish is worth that much work?" Lily leaned in conspiratorially. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true. But it's a really good one." That evening, after Elena and Lily had left, Robert found himself wandering through his apartment, noticing the small ways their presence had altered his space. A child's drawing now adorned his refrigerator, a colorful rendition of Pancake, the stingray complete with a smiling face. A forgotten hair ribbon lay on the coffee table. The air itself seemed different, as if it had absorbed some of Lily's irrepressible spirit. He sat at the piano, fingers tracing the keys without pressing them. The melody in his mind was different tonight, still melancholic, but with threads of something lighter woven through it. When he finally began to play, the music that flowed from his hands surprised him with its complexity of emotion. The next morning, Robert sat in Dr. Wells's office, receiving news that was both expected and devastating. "The condition is progressing faster than we anticipated," the doctor explained gently. "You've been moved up on the transplant list, but the odds haven't improved," Robert finished for him. "I wish I had better news. The procedure remains high risk, and finding a suitable donor in time is challenging." Robert nodded, his mind already elsewhere. What about my daily activities? Any new restrictions? Dr. Wells adjusted his glasses. Rest when you need to. Avoid unnecessary stress. Your body will tell you what it needs. Listen to it. When Robert returned to his penthouse, he made a decision. Picking up his phone, he called Elena's number, something he had never done before. She answered on the third ring, her voice tentative. "Mr. Kensington, is everything all right?" "Robert," he corrected gently. "And yes, everything is fine. I was wondering if you and Lily might be free this Saturday. There's something I'd like to show you both." The hesitation in her voice was palpable. "This Saturday." "The New York Aquarium," he explained. "I thought Lily might enjoy seeing some larger versions of our fish friends, and perhaps lunch afterward." Another pause. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose on your weekend." "It's not an imposition," Robert assured her. "It would be a pleasure." When she finally agreed, Robert felt an unfamiliar flutter of anticipation. It had been years since he had looked forward to something as simple as an outing. His weekends typically blurred into his weekdays, all work, all solitude, all empty achievement. Saturday dawned clear and crisp. Robert's driver picked up Elena and Lily from their apartment, bringing them to the penthouse where Robert waited. Lily bounced with excitement as they rode to Brooklyn, peppering Robert with questions about the aquarium's inhabitants. "Are there sharks, real ones? Do they have teeth, like in the movies? Can they smell? Blood from miles away?" Robert found himself laughing more than he had in years. "Yes, there are sharks. Yes, they have teeth, and their sense of smell is excellent, but perhaps not quite as dramatic as in the movies." Elena watched their interaction with a mixture of amusement and caution. She had dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blue sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Though she tried to hide it, Robert could sense her discomfort. This was a crossing of boundaries that complicated their employer-employee relationship. At the aquarium, however, the awkwardness gradually dissolved in the face of Lily's unbridled enthusiasm. She raced from exhibit to exhibit, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the tanks, calling for both adults to come see, come see. Robert found himself crouching beside her at the touch pools, rolling up his expensive shirt sleeves to feel the rough skin of a small shark. "It feels like sandpaper," Lily exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. "That's because their skin is covered in tiny teeth called denticles," Robert explained. "They're excellent swimmers because those denticles reduce drag in the water." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You know a lot about marine life for an investment banker." Robert smiled sheepishly. "I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was Lily's age. I had books about every creature in the ocean." "What happened?" Elena asked softly. "Life happened," he replied, the simple answer covering decades of choices made and paths not taken. By the time they reached the main shark exhibit, Lily was vibrating with excitement. The massive tank stretched from floor to ceiling, creating the illusion that they were walking through the ocean itself. Sharks of various species glided overhead, their movements graceful despite their fearsome appearance. "They're beautiful," Lily whispered, her small hand finding Robert's and holding tight. The simple gesture, the trust implicit in it, caught Robert off guard. He glanced at Eleanor, who watched them with an unreadable expression. There was something in her eyes, a wariness that went beyond the natural caution of an employee with her boss. It was the vigilance of a mother who had learned the hard way to be careful about who came into her daughter's life. Later, over lunch at a seafood restaurant overlooking the water, Robert found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about. In years, his childhood fascination with Jacques Cousteau, the small boat his grandfather had taught him to sail, his first snorkeling experience in the Florida Keys. "You've seen a real coral reef?" Lily asked, awestruck. "With your own eyes?" "I have," Robert confirmed. "It's like an underwater city, filled with more colors than you can imagine." "I want to see one someday," Lily declared. "When I grow up, I'm going to swim with sharks and discover new fish and name them after my friends." "That sounds like an excellent plan," Robert said, meaning it. "The world needs more marine biologists with a talent for naming things." As they walked along the promenade after lunch, Lily ran ahead to watch a street performer, leaving Robert and Elena briefly alone. "Thank you for today," Elena said quietly. I haven't seen her this happy in a long time. Robert nodded, his eyes on the child. She's remarkable. You've done an amazing job raising her. It hasn't been easy, Elena admitted, but she makes it worth it, even on the hardest days. Something in her tone made Robert look closer. There were shadows beneath her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal, a tension in her shoulders that never fully released. This was a woman who carried a heavy burden, yet she moved through the world with dignity and grace. Elena, he began carefully, if there's ever anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. She met his gaze directly, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and pride. That's very kind, but we manage. I don't doubt it, Robert replied, but everyone needs help sometimes, even those of us who are used to standing alone. He spoke the words. Robert realized he was speaking as much to himself as to her. His entire adult life had been built on the premise that needing others was a weakness. Now, facing his own mortality, he was beginning to question that fundamental assumption. Before Elena could respond, Lily came racing back to them, her face flushed with excitement. The man made a butterfly out of balloons. He said I could keep it. The day at the aquarium marked a turning point. What had begun as an unexpected encounter between strangers from different worlds was evolving into something neither Robert nor Elena could have anticipated. Over the following weeks, their weekend outings became a regular occurrence. The Museum of Natural History, Central Park Zoo, a children's theatre production of The Little Mermaid that had Lily enraptured from start to finish. For Robert, these excursions were a revelation. The city he had lived in for decades suddenly appeared new through Lily's eyes. Places he had dismissed as tourist attractions became venues for discovery and delight. More surprising still was the ease he felt in Elena's company. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, conversation flowed naturally between them, punctuated by comfortable silences that required no filling. One rainy Sunday afternoon found them in Robert's penthouse, where Lily had convinced the adults to help her build a blanket fort in the living room. Mrs. Thompson, who had arrived to prepare lunch, stood in the doorway with an expression that wavered between disapproval and amusement at the sight of her employer arranging sofa cushions under a child's direction. I never thought I'd see the day, she murmured to Elena as they worked in the kitchen. What day is that? Eleanor asked, slicing apples for a snack. The day Robert Kensington played, Mrs. Thompson replied simply. I've worked for him for 15 years, and I've never seen him smile the way he does with your daughter. Eleanor glanced through the doorway, where Robert was solemnly accepting a stuffed unicorn from Lily to place in their completed fort. He's different than I expected, she admitted. He's different than he was, Mrs. Thompson corrected. Something's changed in him these past weeks. What neither woman knew was that Robert had received another call from Dr. Wells that morning. His condition was deteriorating faster than expected. Without a transplant soon, his prognosis was grim. Yet watching Lily arrange her toys in the fort, Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a fierce determination to fight, to stay, to witness what happened next in this small person's extraordinary life. Mommy! Mr. Robert, the fort is ready, Lily called. Time for the Princess Council meeting. As they crawled into the elaborate structure, Robert caught Elena's eye. The simple joy on her face stirred something in his chest that had nothing to do with his failing heart. Over the past weeks, he had come to admire not just her beauty, but her strength, her intelligence, and the unwavering love she showed her daughter. All council members must share a secret, Lily announced once they were settled among the pillows. It's the rules. Is it now? Elena laughed. And who made these rules? Me. I'm the princess, so I make the rules. Lily's logic was impeccable. I'll go first. My secret is, sometimes I feed my vegetables to Simon under the table at school. Lunch. Lily, Elena exclaimed. Who is Simon? He's a dog, Lily explained, as if this were obvious. He comes to school for therapy, and he loves broccoli, so really I'm helping him be healthy. Robert couldn't contain his laughter. That's very generous of you. Your turn, Mr. Robert, Lily prompted. What's your secret? Robert hesitated, suddenly aware of how few secrets he had that were suitable for a child's ears. His business dealings, his diagnosis, his regrets, none of these belonged in a blanket fort on a rainy Sunday. My secret, he said finally, is that I used to have an imaginary friend named Captain Bartholomew. He was a pirate who'd lost his ship and needed my help to find treasure. Lily's eyes widened. Did you find it? We did. Robert smiled at the memory. In my grandmother's garden. It was a box of old coins my grandfather had collected. That's a good secret, Lily approved. Mommy's turn. Eleanor twisted a loose thread on her sleeve, her expression suddenly guarded. My secret is, I'm afraid of thunderstorms. Robert sensed there was more to the story. Something in Elena's voice suggested a deeper fear. But before he could ponder it further, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Thompson appeared, her face unusually tense. Mr. Kensington, there's a man downstairs insisting on seeing Miss Morales. He claims to be Lily's father. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Her hands began to tremble so violently that she clasped them together to hide it. Did he give a name? Jack Dawson, Mrs. Thompson replied. Tell security not to let him up, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please. Robert was already on his feet, moving with a decisiveness that belied his condition. Mrs. Thompson, take Lily to the kitchen for lunch. Elena and I need to talk. Once Lily was safely out of earshot, Robert turned to Elena, who remained frozen in place, her eyes fixed on some distant horror. He found us, she murmured. I don't know how, but he found us. Elena, Robert said gently, crouching beside her despite the protest from his chest. Who is Jack Dawson? She looked at him then, fear and shame battling in her expression. My ex-husband, Lily's biological father. I left him 3 years ago, and we've been running ever since. Running from what? But even as he asked, Robert suspected he knew the answer. From him, Elena whispered, from what he did to us, what he'd still do if he got the chance. Slowly, haltingly, the story emerged. Elena had met Jack Dawson when she was 23, a charming, successful real estate agent who had swept her off her feet with grand gestures and passionate declarations. They married quickly, and at first, everything seemed perfect. The abuse began, subtly, controlling behavior disguised as concern, isolation presented as protection. By the time Lily was born, Eleanor was living in a state of constant fear, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering Jack's explosive temper. The night I left, he came home drunk, she said, her voice detached, as if she were reciting someone else's story. He'd lost a big commission. He started throwing things, screaming. Lily woke up crying and Eleanor's voice broke. He went toward her room. I knew in that moment I had to get her out, or she'd grow up thinking that was normal. That she deserved it. Robert felt a cold fury building inside him. Did you go to the police? Elena gave a bitter laugh. Jack's father is a retired police captain. His brother is a detective in the same precinct where I would have filed the report. I tried once, early on. They made it clear whose side they were on. So you ran? She nodded. We left with nothing but a backpack of clothes. I had some money saved in an account he didn't know about, tips I'd hidden when I was waitressing. We went to a shelter first, then my cousins in Philadelphia. When Jack tracked us there, we moved again and again. New York was supposed to be our fresh start. Robert's mind was already calculating, strategizing. The same skills he applied to hostile takeovers and market manipulation now focused on a single objective, keeping Elena and Lily safe. He can't hurt you here, he said firmly. This building has top-tier security. He won't get past the lobby. You don't understand, Eleanor replied, fear sharpening her voice. Jack doesn't give up. He has resources, connections. If he's found us, he'll find a way to get to us. Robert took her hands, which were still trembling. Elena, look at me. I promise you he will not touch you or Lily, not while I'm alive. The moment the words left his mouth, he realized the cruel irony of his promise. According to Dr. Wells, while I'm alive, might not be very long at all. But looking at Elena's frightened face, Robert made a silent vow that whatever time he had left would be dedicated to ensuring their safety. His phone buzzed with a text from building security. Subject removed from premises. Police notified of trespassing. He's gone for now, Robert told her, but we need a plan. For the next hour, while Lily remained blissfully unaware in the kitchen with Mrs. Thompson, Robert and Elena talked strategy. He called his head of security, then his lawyer, setting in motion a comprehensive protection plan. By evening, when it was time for Elena and Lily to leave, two of Robert's security team were ready to escort them home and maintain a watch on their apartment. "I don't know how to thank you," Elena said as they prepared to leave. "This is beyond anything I could have expected." "There's no need for thanks," Robert replied, "but I want you to consider something. My apartment has 5 bedrooms, only one is being used. You and Lily would be safer here, at least until we can get a restraining order in place and address the situation properly." Elena's eyes widened. "Robert, we couldn't possibly." "Just think about it," he insisted. "No pressure, no strings attached. Just a secure place to stay while we sort this out." After they left, Robert sat alone in his study, the blanket fort still standing in his living room like a monument to an afternoon of innocence, now overshadowed by threat. His chest ached, both from his condition and from the weight of what Elena had shared. He had spent his career identifying weaknesses in corporate opponents and exploiting them without mercy. Now, for the first time, he was using that same strategic thinking to protect rather than to conquer. The revelation was both humbling and energizing. Robert picked up his phone and made one more call to a private investigator he had used for corporate matters in the past. "I need everything on a Jack Dawson," he said without preamble. "Former real estate agent, likely still in the business. Has family connections in law enforcement. History of domestic violence, though probably not on record. I want financials, current address, workplace, associates, habits, weaknesses, everything." "Sounds personal," the investigator commented. "It is," Robert replied simply. "And Craig, this is priority 1. Whatever your usual fee is, double it. I need results fast." As he hung up, Robert felt a twinge in his chest, sharper than before. He reached for his medication, swallowing the pills with a grimace. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just as he had found something truly worth living for, his body was betraying him. But if his time was limited, he would make it count. Elena and Lily had awakened something in him that he had thought long dead, the capacity to care deeply, to fight for something beyond himself. For the first time in decades, Robert Kensington had a purpose that had nothing to do with wealth or power, and he would not fail. 3 days after Jack Dawson's appearance at the building, Elena called Robert at dawn, her voice tight with controlled panic. "He was outside our apartment building last night. The security men you sent saw him watching from across the street." Robert was already out of bed, ignoring the dizziness that had become his constant companion. "Did he approach you?" "No, but he left something at our door." Eleanor's voice broke. "Slightly. A doll for Lily. It was her favorite when we lived with him. I'd left it behind when we ran." The implication was clear. Jack was sending a message. "I know where you are. I can get close enough to touch your life." "Pack what you need," Robert said firmly. "I'm sending the car. You're staying here until This is resolved." This time Eleanor didn't protest. 3 hours later, Mrs. Thompson was showing Eleanor and Lily to 2 adjoining bedrooms in the east wing of the penthouse, as far from Robert's master suite as possible, a deliberate choice to maintain appropriate boundaries. Lily, oblivious to the adults' concerns, was thrilled at what she interpreted as an extended sleepover with her new favorite person. "Can we build a bigger fort?" she asked, bouncing on the guest bed that was 3 times the size of her own. "One that has room for all my stuffed animals?" "Let's get settled first, sweetheart," Elena said, forcing a smile. "Remember what we talked about? This is Mr. Kensington's home, and we need to be respectful guests." "Robert," he corrected gently from the doorway, "and Lily, I think a bigger fort is an excellent idea. Perhaps in the media room it has more floor space." Elena shot him a grateful look for maintaining normalcy in front of her daughter. Once Lily was happily arranging her few possessions in her new room, the adults retreated to the kitchen, where Mrs. Thompson was preparing breakfast. "My lawyer will be here at 11, Robert informed Elena. "He's the best family court attorney in Manhattan. We're going to file for an emergency restraining order today." Eleanor wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee, her knuckles white. "Jack has fought these before. In Philadelphia, he convinced the judge I was unstable, making things up to keep him from his daughter. This time will be different," Robert assured her. "We have documentation of his trespassing here and at your apartment, and my lawyer, let's just say he's very thorough." What Robert didn't mention was that Craig, his private investigator, had already uncovered disturbing information about Jack Dawson. Since Eleanor's departure, Jack had been involved in 2 other relationships that had ended with police reports filed by the women, though charges were mysteriously dropped each time. His real estate business was struggling, with mounting debts and rumors of unethical practices. The man was desperate and volatile, a dangerous combination. By noon, the wheels were in motion. Robert's lawyer had taken Elena's statement and filed for the emergency order. Security at the penthouse had been doubled, with strict instructions regarding Jack Dawson. Robert's private doctor had also visited, ostensibly to check on a household member with a cold, but actually to examine Robert, whose symptoms were worsening despite his efforts to hide them. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Dr. Wells had admonished privately. "The stress isn't helping your condition." "I don't have the luxury of taking it easy right now," Robert had replied. "Just give me something to manage the symptoms." Now, as afternoon faded into evening, Robert found himself sitting at the piano, playing softly while Lily napped and Elena spoke with the lawyer in the study. The melody that emerged was pensive but no longer desolate, a reflection of his complicated emotional state. So absorbed was he in the music that he didn't notice Elena standing in the doorway until he finished the piece. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. "Chopin?" Robert nodded. "Nocturne in E-flat major, my mother's favorite." Eleanor moved into the room, taking a seat in the armchair near the piano. "You could have had a career as a musician." "Perhaps in another life," Robert acknowledged. "My father had different plans." "And you always do what your father wanted?" The question caught him off guard. "I stopped trying to please my father long ago, but by then certain paths were already closed." Elena studied him thoughtfully. "It's never too late to open new ones." The simple wisdom in her words struck a chord in Robert. Here was a woman who had literally run from her past to forge a new future for herself and her child. Her courage made his own choices seem timid by comparison. "How did the meeting with Stanley go?" he asked, changing the subject. "Your lawyer thinks we have a strong case," Elena replied. "But he warned me that Jack won't give up easily. The restraining order is just the first step." Robert closed the piano lid gently. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you. My investigator found some information about Jack that concerns me." He explained what Craig had uncovered, the pattern of relationships, the financial troubles, the increasing desperation in Jack's recent actions. "He needs money," Eleanor said, connecting the dots. "That's why he's suddenly so determined to find us after all this time. He probably thinks he can get child support or use Lily as leverage," Robert finished grimly, "which makes our next steps even more important." Before he could elaborate, Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her stuffed octopus clutched under one arm. "I had a bad dream," she mumbled, climbing into her mother's lap without invitation. Elena stroked her daughter's hair. "What about, sweetheart?" "The angry man was trying to take me away from you," Lily whispered. "He said I belonged with him." Elena's eyes met Robert's over Lily's head, a silent communication of shared fear. This wasn't just a nightmare. It was Lily processing fragments of conversations she'd overheard, fears she'd absorbed from her mother. "No one is taking you anywhere," Robert said firmly, moving to kneel in front of them despite the protest from his joints. "You and your mom are safe here. Lily regarded him solemnly. Promise? I promise. The vow felt sacred on his lips. That evening, after Lily was tucked into bed, Robert and Elena sat in the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Mrs. Thompson had prepared dinner before leaving for the night, but neither adult had much appetite. I want to show you something, Robert said, retrieving his laptop. My lawyer suggested a more permanent solution to your situation. Opened a document, legal papers for a trust fund in Lily's name with Elena as the trustee. The amount listed made her gasp. Robert, this is millions of dollars. $5 million to be exact, he confirmed. Enough to provide for Lily's education and future, and for you both to live comfortably anywhere you choose. Elena shook her head in disbelief. I can't accept this, it's too much. It's not charity, Robert explained. It's security. Jack is motivated by money and control. If you have financial independence, true independence, it removes one of his primary weapons. But why would you do this for us? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You've known us for such a short time. Robert considered his answer carefully. How could he explain that in the few months since Lily had wiped his tears in the park, his entire worldview had shifted, that what had begun as an unexpected encounter had become the most meaningful connection of his adult life? Because you both matter to me, he said simply, more than I can adequately express. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Robert, there's something you should know. When we first met, when I started bringing Lily to your apartment, it wasn't entirely coincidental. Robert frowned, not understanding. The cleaning service didn't randomly assign me to your penthouse, Elena continued. I requested it specifically. Why? She took a deep breath. Because I'd researched you. I knew you were wealthy, powerful, lived alone. I thought if I could establish a connection, maybe you could help protect us from Jack. I never expected you to actually care about us. The confession hung in the air between them. Robert absorbed it slowly, examining the implications from all angles as he would a complex business proposition. So our meeting was calculated, he said finally. Elena nodded, shame evident in her expression. At first. But everything that happened afterward, Lily's attachment to you, our friendship, none of that was planned or fake. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid you'd think it was all manipulation. Robert was quiet for a long moment. In his previous life, such a revelation would have triggered immediate suspicion, anger, withdrawal. Now, looking at the woman before him, this fierce mother who had done everything in her power to protect her child, he felt only respect. You did what you had to do, he said at last. I would have done the same in your position. Relief washed over Elena's face. You're not angry. How could I be? Your plan brought Lily into my life. Robert smiled ruefully. And yours. Whatever your initial motives, I'm grateful for the outcome. The honesty between them created a new intimacy. They talked late into the night, sharing stories they had previously kept guarded. Elena spoke of her childhood in Arizona, her dreams of becoming an interior designer before life took an unexpected turn. Robert revealed more about his complicated relationship with his father, the loneliness of his success, the emptiness that had defined his existence before they entered it. Neither mentioned the future directly, the temporary nature of their arrangement. Elena and Lily, staying until the Jack situation was resolved, hovered unspoken between them. So did Robert's health condition, which he still hadn't disclosed. As the conversation finally wound down near midnight, Elena stood to go to her room. At the doorway, she paused. Thank you, she said simply, not just for the protection and the trust fund, for seeing us, really seeing us. Thank you for letting me, Robert replied. After she left, Robert remained in the dimly lit living room, contemplating how completely his life had transformed in just a few months. The penthouse that had once felt like a mausoleum now hummed with life. The fortune he had amassed, which had seemed like the point of his existence, now appeared merely as a tool to protect what truly mattered. His phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Wells. Test results in. I need to discuss urgently. Call me. Robert stared at the screen. a heaviness settling in his chest that had nothing to do with his condition. Whatever time he had left, he wanted to spend it ensuring Elena and Lily's future was secure. Everything else, his company, his legacy, his reputation, seemed inconsequential by comparison. For the first time in his life, Robert Kensington had found something he valued more than success. The irony that this revelation came as his time was potentially running out was not lost on him, but rather than bitterness, he felt an odd sense of peace. If these were to be his final months, at least they would be filled with purpose. Setting. His phone aside without returning the call, Robert moved to the window. In the apartment's reflection, he could see the blanket Fort Lily had insisted on building in the living room after dinner, a haphazard construction of sheets and cushions that somehow looked more beautiful to him than the meticulously designed luxury that surrounded it. Like the child who had created it, the fort represented everything his life had lacked: spontaneity, imagination, joy. And like her mother, it embodied resilience, the ability to create something meaningful from whatever materials life provided. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Jack Dawson would not disappear quietly. Robert's condition would not miraculously improve. The complications of their unusual living arrangement would continue to unfold. But tonight, in this moment of stillness, Robert allowed himself to simply be grateful for the unexpected gift of their presence in his life. The next morning, Robert woke to the unfamiliar sound of laughter drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, disoriented between sleep and wakefulness, he wondered if he was dreaming. Then reality settled over him. Elena and Lily were living in his home, transforming its acoustics as surely as they had transformed his life. He showered and dressed carefully, taking extra time to ensure his appearance betrayed none of the fatigue or discomfort that had become his constant companions. The medication Dr. Wells had prescribed helped mask the symptoms, but couldn't eliminate them entirely. Still, Robert was determined not to let his condition interfere with what needed to be done. In the kitchen, he found a scene of domestic harmony that stopped him in the doorway. Lily sat at the counter, her face smeared with pancake batter, as she attempted to flip a misshapen creation in a pan. Elena stood behind her, guiding her small hands, both of them laughing as the pancake folded in on itself. "I think that one's for Mr. Grumbles," Lily declared, referring to the reclusive fish in the aquarium. "Good morning," Robert said, entering the room. "I see breakfast is an adventure today." Lily beamed at him. "We're making pancakes. Mommy said it was okay to use the kitchen." "Is it okay?" "More than okay," Robert assured her. "Although I'm not sure Mrs. Thompson will recognize her domain when she arrives." Elena's cheeks flushed slightly. "We'll clean everything up, I promise. Lily wanted to make you breakfast as a thank you." "For letting us have a sleepover at your house," Lily explained seriously. Robert felt something catch in his throat. That had nothing to do with his heart condition. "That's very thoughtful of you, Lily. They smell delicious." As they ate breakfast together, Robert gamely consuming the oddly shaped pancakes Lily had proudly prepared, he couldn't help but marvel at how natural it felt. For decades he had eaten alone at this counter, reading financial reports or checking emails. Now he found himself fully engaged in a debate about whether maple syrup or honey was the superior pancake topping. Work emails unchecked on his phone. After breakfast, Robert retreated to his home office for a conference call he couldn't postpone. Eleanor took Lily to the media room to set up the fort they had promised to build. The normality of the morning made it almost possible to forget the circumstances that had brought them together, almost but not quite. Midway through his call, Robert's private line rang. Excusing himself from the conference, he switched over. "Kensington." "Robert, it's Craig. We have a situation with Dawson." Robert's grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of situation?" "He's filed for emergency custody of Lily. Claims Elena is emotionally unstable and has been keeping his daughter from him illegally. There's a hearing scheduled for next week." A cold fury settled in Robert's chest. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming Elena has entered into a relationship with you to secure financial support, and that she's using Lily as leverage." He has photos of the three of you at the aquarium, the park, entering your building. He's painting it as Elena being an opportunist who's latched onto a wealthy man. That's absurd, Robert snapped. She's staying here temporarily for security reasons. I know that, Craig replied patiently. But from the outside it could look compromising, especially given your resources compared to Elena's. Dawson's lawyer is suggesting she's an unfit mother who's using her relationship with you for financial gain. The irony of the accusation wasn't lost on Robert. Elena had indeed initially sought him out as a potential protector, but her motives had been desperation, not greed, and everything that had developed between them since had been genuine. Forward everything to Stanley, Robert instructed, referring to his lawyer. And Craig, I want to know who's bankrolling this. Jack Dawson doesn't have the resources for a custody battle of this magnitude. Already on it, Craig assured him. Preliminary digging suggests he's got a backer, someone with deep pockets who's covering the legal fees, still working on identifying who. After hanging up, Robert sat at his desk, strategic mind already calculating their next moves. The custody filing changed everything. What had been a relatively straightforward matter of securing a restraining order had now escalated into a legal battle that would put Elena's motherhood on trial. He was so absorbed in thought that he didn't notice Lily standing in the doorway until she spoke. "Mr. Robert, are you busy with important business stuff?" Robert looked up, forcing a smile. "Never too busy for you, Lily. What do you need?" "Our fort is ready for inspection," she announced with formal gravity, "and we need a grown-up to help with the roof. It keeps falling down." "I'll be right there," he promised. "Just need to make one more call." As Lily skipped away, Robert dialed Dr. Wells, knowing he couldn't postpone the conversation any longer. "I've been waiting for your call," the doctor said by way of greeting. "The latest tests aren't encouraging, Robert. The medication is buying you time, but not as much as we'd hoped, without a transplant." "How long?" Robert asked bluntly. Dr. Wells sighed. 3 months, possibly 4 with aggressive treatment. I've moved you to the top of the transplant list, but finding a suitable donor in time remains a long shot." Robert absorbed this information with a strange calm. 3 months. Enough time to ensure Eleanor and Lily's safety, to put the necessary legal protections in place, to make arrangements for their future. "I understand," he said finally. "Keep me posted on the transplant situation, but otherwise continue the current treatment. I have matters to attend to." After hanging up, Robert allowed himself a brief moment of grief, not for himself, but for the future he wouldn't see. He had just found a reason to live, only to learn his time was running out. The cruel irony might have broken him once, but now it only strengthened his resolve. Whatever time he had left would be dedicated to securing Elena and Lily's future. He found them in the media room, where an elaborate construction of sheets, blankets, and furniture had transformed the space into a magical hideaway. Lily immediately drafted him into service, directing him with the authority of a seasoned architect on where to secure blanket corners. "You're very good at fort building," she observed as Robert used his tie clip to fasten a sheet to the back of a chair. "I built a few in my day," Robert admitted, "though none as magnificent as this one." Once the structure was deemed stable, Lily insisted they all crawl inside. The 3 of them sat in the dim, filtered light of the fort, surrounded by pillows and Lily's stuffed animals, who had been arranged as an audience. "This is my favorite place in the whole world," Lily declared. "Can we live here forever?" The innocent question hung in the air. Elena shot Robert an apologetic glance, clearly concerned that Lily was becoming too attached to a temporary arrangement. "Sweetheart, remember what we talked about. This is Mr. Robert's home. We're just staying for a little while." "But why? Can't we stay forever?" Lily persisted. "Mr. Robert is all alone and he needs a family, and we need a safe place away from the angry man." "It makes perfect sense." Out of the mouths of babes. Robert felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his condition. The simple logic of a child had cut through all the complications adults created. "Life is a bit more complicated." "Than that, Lily?" Elena began gently. "It doesn't have to be," Robert interrupted softly. Both Elena and Lily turned to look at him, surprised by his interjection. Lily has a point. Elena's expression was unreadable. Robert. We should discuss it later, he said, nodding slightly toward Lily to indicate this wasn't a conversation for her ears. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. The fort became the center of operations for a complex game involving Lily's stuffed animals embarking on an ocean voyage, with occasional stops to visit the real fish in the aquarium. Robert participated fully, surprising himself with his capacity for imagination after decades of suppressing it. By evening, when Lily was finally tucked into bed, exhausted from her adventures, Robert and Elena retreated to the living room. Mrs. Thompson had left dinner for them before departing, but neither was particularly hungry. "I heard from my investigator today," Robert said without preamble. "Jack has filed for emergency custody." Eleanor's face drained of color. "No." Robert explained what Craig had told him, watching as fear gave way to anger in Elena's expression. "He's never cared about being a father to Lily," she said, voice tight with emotion. "This is about control, about punishing me for leaving." So won't let him win," Robert assured her. "Stanley is already preparing our response. We'll fight this with everything we have." Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small in the expansive living room. "I can't lose her." "Robert, she's everything to me." "You won't lose her," he promised. "But there's something we need to discuss. Something Lily said earlier." Elena looked up, wariness evident in her posture. "About staying here permanently?" "Yes." Robert took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I've been thinking about it. And she's right. It makes sense for you both to stay, not just temporarily, but indefinitely. Robert, we can't impose on you like that." "It's not an imposition," he insisted. "This place has never felt like a home until you and Lily were here. It's been a mausoleum, a monument to success without meaning." He moved to sit beside her on the sofa, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, Elena. I'm offering a safe home for you and Lily with no expectations attached. Separate spaces, clear boundaries. You could finish your interior design degree. Lily could attend the best schools, and He hesitated. "I would have the privilege of watching her grow up for however long I have." Eleanor frowned at his choice of words. "What do you mean, however long you have?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than Robert had anticipated. He had planned to keep his condition private until Elena and Lily's situation was resolved, not wanting to burden them further. But he couldn't ask them to build a life here without full disclosure. "There's something I haven't told you," he began slowly. "Something I should have shared earlier." Over the next half hour, Robert explained everything, the diagnosis, the prognosis, the slim hope of a transplant. Elena listened in stunned silence, tears gathering in her eyes as the full picture emerged. 3 months, she whispered when he had finished. "And you've been dealing with this alone, all while helping us?" Robert shrugged slightly. "It gave me purpose, a reason to fight. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want you to feel obligated to stay, or worse, to leave because you thought I couldn't help you. Your situation with Jack needed to be addressed regardless of my health." Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, despite the tears that now flowed freely down her cheeks. "Do you know what Lily said to me the other day? She said you have a light inside you that was sleeping for a long time, but now it's waking up." Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "She sees things adults miss, and she's right about you." "She's an extraordinary child," Robert agreed softly. "You've done an amazing job raising her, despite impossible circumstances, and you've given us hope when we had none." Elena reached out and took his hand. "We're not going anywhere, Robert. Whatever time you have left, whether it's 3 months or 30 years, we'll face it together." Something broke open in Robert's chest, not the physical pain he'd grown accustomed to, but an emotional release so powerful it left him breathless. For a moment, he couldn't speak, could only hold tightly to Eleanor's hand, as if it were a lifeline. "There's more we need to discuss," he said finally. "Practical matters. I've already revised my will to provide for you and Lily, but there are other arrangements to be made." Elena started to protest, but Robert held up a hand to stop her. Please let me finish. This isn't charity, Elena. It's legacy. For the first time in my life, I care about what happens after I'm gone. I want to know that you and Lily will be secure, that what I've built will serve a purpose beyond mere accumulation. They talked, long into the night, making plans, confronting possibilities both hoped for and feared. Robert laid out his vision for a trust that would not only provide financial security, but would fund scholarships for children from abusive homes, support domestic violence shelters, and create pathways for single mothers to complete their education. It would be your project to oversee, he explained, something meaningful that honors your journey. As the city lights twinkled beyond the windows and the night deepened around them, they crafted a future neither could have imagined months before, a future built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the love they both felt for a remarkable little girl who had brought them together. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of legal battles, medical appointments, and moments of unexpected joy. Robert, Elena, and Lily settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural, as if they had always been a unit rather than three separate souls thrown together by circumstance. The custody hearing loomed over them, casting a shadow on even the brightest days. Jack Dawson had escalated his campaign, giving interviews to tabloids about his heartbreak over being separated from his daughter, painting Eleanor as a gold digger who had fallen into the orbit of a wealthy man. The stories were picked up by gossip columns transforming their private struggle into public spectacle. Ignore it, Stanley advised during a strategy session in Robert's study. This is a common tactic, trying to try the case in the court of public opinion. What matters is what happens in the courtroom. Elena wasn't so easily reassured. What if the judge reads these articles? What if they believe Jack's version? They won't, Robert promised, his voice steadier than his heart. We have documentation of his abuse, testimony from your former neighbors, medical reports from the time you sought treatment for injuries. The truth is on our side. What he didn't say was that he had instructed Craig to dig deeper into Jack's finances, determined to uncover who was bankrolling this vendetta. The answer, when it finally came, left him reeling. It's Hammond, Craig reported over a secure line. James Hammond of Hammond Development. Robert's blood ran cold. Hammond was his chief business rival, a man he had bested in numerous deals over the years. Their most recent confrontation had cost Hammond a prime development opportunity in Brooklyn, a property he'd coveted for years before Robert's company had outmaneuvered him. You're sure? Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. Craig was nothing if not thorough. Positive. Hammond and Dawson met 6 times in the past month. Hammond's private foundation has been paying Dawson's legal fees. They're trying to disguise it, but the paper trail is clear if you know where to look. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Hammond had discovered Robert's connection to Elena and Lily, perhaps through the same tabloids now, publishing Jack's sob story, and saw an opportunity for revenge. By backing Jack's custody claim, Hammond could strike at Robert where it would hurt most, all while maintaining plausible deniability. Robert shared this revelation with Stanley, but decided to shield Elena from it. She was already carrying enough worry, without adding the knowledge that a billionaire with a grudge was using her ex-husband as a pawn in a corporate revenge plot. The morning of the custody hearing dawned clear and cold. Robert had barely slept, a combination of anxiety and worsening symptoms keeping him awake through the night. Dr. Wells had called the previous evening with news both hopeful and frustrating. A potential donor match had been identified, but there were complications that might render the organ unsuitable. More tests were being conducted. Time, the one commodity Robert couldn't buy, continued to slip away. Lily remained with Mrs. Thompson at the penthouse, while Robert and Eleanor, accompanied by Stanley and 2 security guards, made their way to the courthouse. The media presence outside was unexpected and unwelcome. Clearly someone had tipped them off. "Keep your head high and don't engage," Stanley instructed as they navigated through the shouted questions and camera flashes. Inside, the courtroom felt stifling despite its high ceilings and formal grandeur. Jack Dawson sat at the opposite table, a picture of wounded fatherhood in a conservative suit. his lawyer, one of the city's most expensive, whispering in his ear. When Jack caught Elena's eye, he offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a predator's smile, smug with anticipated victory. The proceedings began with opening statements. Jack's lawyer painted a heart-wrenching picture of a devoted father desperate to reconnect with his beloved daughter, cruelly separated from him by an unstable ex-wife who had fled into the arms of a wealthy benefactor. The insinuations about Eleanor's relationship with Robert were just vague enough to avoid being slanderous, while planting seeds of doubt about her character. When Stanley rose to respond, his approach was methodical and devastating. He presented hospital records documenting Elena's injuries during her marriage, police reports that had been filed but mysteriously dropped, testimony from neighbors who had heard Jack's rages through apartment walls. Most damaging was the evidence Craig had uncovered of Jack's similar patterns with subsequent girlfriends, women who had initially filed complaints only to withdraw them after what appeared to be intimidation. "Your Honor," Stanley concluded, "this is not a case about a father seeking reunification with his child. This is about a man who uses violence and control to dominate the women in his life and who now seeks to punish Ms. Morales for having the courage to leave. Ms. Morales has provided a stable, loving home for Lily despite extraordinary challenges. Her temporary residence in Mr. Kensington's home is a security measure, not a romantic arrangement, implemented after Mr. Dawson's increasingly threatening behavior." By the time Elena took the stand, the mood in the courtroom had shifted perceptibly. She spoke with quiet dignity about the years of abuse, her desperate flight to protect Lily, the constant fear of being found. When asked about her relationship with Robert, she was forthright. "Mr. Kensington has been a friend when we needed one most," she stated simply. "He offered his home as a safe harbor when Mr. Dawson's threats made our apartment unsafe. There has never been any romantic involvement." Jack's lawyer attempted to shake her testimony during cross-examination, insinuating that she was trading her company and Lily's for financial support. Elena's response was calm but firm. "Mr. Kensington has offered help because he cares about Lily's welfare. He knows what it means to grow up in an environment of fear, and he doesn't want that for her. Our arrangement is temporary, and his generosity comes with no expectations." When it was Jack's turn to testify, cracks began to appear in his carefully constructed facade. Under Stanley's relentless questioning, his story about being a devoted father desperate to reconnect with his daughter began to unravel. He couldn't recall basic facts about Lily's life, her allergies, her favorite books, the names of her teachers. When pressed about specific incidents of abuse Elena had described, his temper flared briefly before he could rein it in, a momentary glimpse of the rage that lurked beneath the surface. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with 20 years on the family court bench, watched it all with shrewd eyes. By the time final arguments were presented, Robert felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence against Jack was overwhelming, his performance on the stand unconvincing. "I'll take this under advisement and issue my ruling tomorrow morning," the judge announced. Court is adjourned. Outside, the media circus continued. Robert's security team formed a protective barrier around him and Elena as they made their way to the waiting car. From the corner of his eye, Robert spotted James Hammond, observing from a discreet distance, his expression inscrutable. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the game being played. The ride back to the penthouse was quiet, both Robert and Eleanor lost in their thoughts. Only when they arrived home, greeted by Lily's enthusiastic embrace, did the tension begin to dissipate. "Did you win?" Lily asked, looking from her mother to Robert. "We'll find out tomorrow, sweetheart," Elena replied, smoothing her daughter's hair. "But I think we did our very best." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Robert and Elena sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. The city sprawled before them, a tapestry of lights and shadows. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Robert said quietly. "We won't stop fighting. If the ruling doesn't go our way, we'll appeal. We'll do whatever it takes." Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. I know, and I'm grateful. But Robert, this can't go on indefinitely. You need to focus on your health, on the transplant possibility. You've already done more than I ever could have asked. Don't you understand? Robert turned to face her, his voice intense. This isn't something I'm doing despite my condition. It's because of it. For the first time in my life, I'm using my resources for something that truly matters. Elena's eyes glistened in the dim light. You truly matter too. Robert, to Lily and to me. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to fully articulate. Instead, they sat in companionable silence, watching the city below and the stars above, drawing strength from each other's presence. Morning brought a call from Stanley. The judge has made her decision. She wants all parties in her chambers in an hour. The return to the courthouse felt like entering a dream. The same corridors, the same tension, but now with the added weight of finality. Jack and his lawyer were already waiting outside the judge's chambers when they arrived, Jack's confidence visibly diminished from the previous day. Inside, the judge wasted no time on preliminaries. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, I'm granting full custody to Ms. Morales, with no visitation rights for Mr. Dawson at this time, her stern gaze fixed on Jack. Furthermore, I'm issuing a permanent restraining order prohibiting Mr. Dawson from coming within 500 feet of Miss Morales or Lily. The evidence of past abuse and ongoing harassment is compelling and disturbing. Relief washed over Elena in a visible wave, her body sagging slightly as the tension of years released at once. Robert resisted the urge to embrace her, aware of the professional boundaries they needed to maintain in this setting. Ms. Morales, the judge continued, while I find no impropriety in your current living arrangement with Mr. Kensington, I would advise formalizing the parameters of this situation going forward, particularly as it relates to Lily's understanding of Mr. Kensington's role in her life. Yes, Your Honor, Elena replied. We've already begun discussing those details. Outside the courthouse, Jack Dawson stood waiting, his lawyer notably absent. As Elena and Robert emerged, flanked by security, Jack stepped forward. This isn't over, he said quietly, his voice carrying only to their ears. You might have won today, but I'll be watching, waiting. One mistake, one slip, and I'll be back. Before either could respond, Craig appeared at Jack's side, speaking low and fast. Mr. Dawson, I think you should know that your financial arrangement with James Hammond has been documented and provided to the District Attorney's Office for review. There are questions about whether it constitutes conspiracy to commit perjury. I'd suggest you leave now and find yourself a criminal defense attorney. The color drained from Jack's face. Without another word, he turned and walked away, shoulders hunched in defeat. That was a bluff, Craig admitted once Jack was out of earshot. But an effective one. He'll be looking over his shoulder for months. The victory, though sweet, left Robert exhausted. By the time they returned to the penthouse, the pain in his chest had intensified to alarming levels. He excused himself to call Dr. Wells, only to find the doctor had been trying to reach him. The donor heart is viable, Dr. Wells announced without preamble. We need you at the hospital immediately. The transplant team is assembling now. Everything moved with dreamlike speed after that. Robert briefly explained the situation to Elena, whose joy at the custody ruling transformed into anxiety for his surgery. Mrs. Thompson was called to stay with Lily. A bag was hastily packed. The private elevator whisked them to the waiting car. Are you afraid? Eleanor asked during the drive, her hand holding his with surprising strength. Not of dying, Robert answered truthfully, only of leaving things unfinished. At the hospital, the efficiency of the transplant team was both reassuring and intimidating. As Robert was prepped for surgery, he asked for a moment alone with Elena. If something goes wrong, he began. Don't, she interrupted, pressing her fingers gently to his lips. You're going to be fine. Please, Eleanor, I need to say this. Robert took her hand, drawing strength from her touch. If something happens, everything is in place. The trust for Lily, the foundation, the penthouse, it's all legally arranged. You won't have to worry. Tears filled Elena's eyes. We don't want your provisions, Robert. We want you. The simple declaration held more meaning than any elaborate profession of love could have. Robert felt his own eyes grow damp. "Then I'll do my best to come back to you both." As the orderlies arrived to take him to surgery, Robert held Elena's gaze for one last moment. "Tell Lily. Tell her Mr. Grumbles needs someone to check on him." Elena's laugh was watery but genuine. "I will. She'll be waiting to name all your new fish when you come home." The surgery lasted 8 hours. 8 hours during which Elena alternated between pacing the waiting room and sitting in frozen stillness, caught between hope and terror. When Dr. Wells finally emerged, his expression gave nothing away. "The tie. Surgery was successful," he announced, his professional demeanor cracking slightly to reveal relief. "It was touch and go for a while. His condition had deteriorated more than our tests indicated. But the new heart is functioning well. The next 48 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Recovery was slow and painful. Days in, the ICU blurred together, marked only by brief visits from Elena, and once Robert was stable enough, short video calls with Lily, who solemnly reported on the status of each fish in the aquarium. "Mr. Grumbles misses you," she informed him seriously. During one call, "He stays in his cave all the time now. Mrs. Thompson says he's being temperamental," Elena supplied from beside her. "Yeah, that. She says you're being that too." Lily giggled at her own joke. 2 weeks after the surgery, Robert was finally cleared to return home. The penthouse had been modified under Dr. Wells's direction, a hospital bed installed in the study, which had been transformed into a temporary bedroom to avoid the stairs to the master suite. Medical equipment discreetly arranged, a nurse scheduled for daily visits. What hadn't been planned, but which Robert discovered upon his arrival, were the changes Elena and Lily had made to welcome him home. Colorful drawings lined the walls of his makeshift bedroom, Lily's artwork depicting underwater scenes, fantastic creatures, and 3 stick figures labeled Mommy, Lily, and Mr. Robert. A small garden of potted plants brightened the windowsill. The harsh medical equipment was softened by carefully draped fabrics in soothing colors. "We wanted it to feel like home, not a hospital," Elena explained as she helped him settle in. "Lily picked all the plants. She's been watering them every day, practicing for when you were strong enough to come back." The first few days were the hardest. Pain medication left Robert foggy, while the physical limitations of recovery frustrated his independent nature. But there were moments of grace that made the struggle worthwhile. Lily reading to him from her favorite books, her small finger tracing the lines as she sounded out difficult words. Elena bringing her interior design coursework to his room, seeking his opinion on color schemes and space planning. Mrs. Thompson's uncharacteristic fussing, revealed in homemade broths and perfectly fluffed pillows. 1 month after surgery, Robert was strong enough to join them for dinner at the table for the first time. The meal was simple. Mrs. Thompson had prepared Robert's favorite pasta, modified to accommodate his new dietary restrictions, but the occasion felt momentous. "I have an announcement," Robert said as they finished eating. "Dr. Wells says my recovery is progressing well. The new heart is being accepted without complications." "That's wonderful news," Elena exclaimed, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "There's more," Robert continued. "I've been doing a lot of thinking during my recovery, about the future, about what matters most." He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I've decided to step back from Kensington Capital. Not completely, not yet. But I'm delegating most of the day-to-day operations to the executive team." Elena's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure that's what you want?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything," Robert confirmed. "This experience has clarified my priorities. I want to focus on the foundation we discussed, the one supporting families affected by domestic violence, and—" He hesitated, glancing at Lily, who was listening with unusual attentiveness. "I want to focus on us, the family we're becoming." Lily perked up at this. "Does that mean we're staying forever? For real?" "If that's what you and your mother want," Robert replied carefully, "I've come to think of you both as my family. But it's a big decision, and one we all need to agree on." Elena's expression was unreadable for a moment. then softened into something that made Robert's new heart beat faster. I think we'd like that very much. That night, after Lily was asleep, Robert and Elena sat in the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. 3 months had passed since that first day in the park when a small hand had wiped away his tears. 3 months that had transformed everything. I never expected this, Eleanor admitted softly. When I first sought you out, all I wanted was safety for Lily. I never imagined that you'd end up with a cardiac patient with a savior. Complex? Robert suggested wryly. Elena laughed, the sound warming the room. That I'd find someone who sees us, really sees us, who values Lily for her extraordinary spirit, who understands what we've been through without pity. I never expected to find a reason to live just when I thought I was running out of time, Robert countered. You and Lily gave me that gift. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each contemplating the unlikely journey that had brought them together. I meant what I said earlier, Robert said finally. About us being a family. I don't want to rush you, and I understand if you need time. Elena leaned forward and with gentle deliberation pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, but unmistakable in its meaning. A promise, a beginning. Some things don't need time, she whispered as she drew back. Some things you just know. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Robert stood in the living room of the penthouse, now transformed by Eleanor's design talent into a true home, and straightened his tie nervously. Today was a day he had once thought he would never live to see. You look very handsome, Mr. Robert, Lily observed from her perch on the piano bench, resplendent in a blue dress that matched her eyes. At 7, she carried herself with a confidence that belied the trauma of her early years. Thank you, Lily. You look quite beautiful yourself. Robert knelt to her level, wincing only slightly at the pull of healing tissue. Are you ready for your big role? Lily nodded solemnly, holding up the small velvet pillow that would carry the rings. I've been practicing. I won't drop them, I promise. I know you won't. He hesitated, then continued. Lily, I wanted to ask you something. Important. After today, when your mother and I are married, I was wondering how you would feel about me adopting you, legally becoming your father. Lily considered this with characteristic thoughtfulness. Would I have to call you Dad? You could call me whatever feels right to you, Robert assured her. Nothing would change except that legally we would be family. We're already family, Lily stated, with the simple certainty of childhood. But I think it would be good to make it official. She tilted her head, studying him. Can I still call you Mr. Robert? I'm used to it. Robert felt his throat tighten with emotion. Of course you can. Then yes, Lily decided. You can adopt. As from the hallway came the sound of Mrs. Thompson's voice. It's time. Together, Robert and Lily walked onto the rooftop terrace, where a small gathering of friends waited. The space had been transformed with flowers and ribbons, the Manhattan skyline providing a spectacular backdrop. Stanley was there along, with Dr. Wells, Craig, and a few others who had been part of their journey. As the string quartet began to play, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, radiant in a simple ivory dress. Their eyes met across the terrace, and Robert felt his new heart swell with a joy he had never thought possible. Later, after vows were exchanged and congratulations received, the small family stood together at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the city as the sun began to set. Happy? Robert asked, his arm around Elena's waist. More than I ever imagined possible, she replied, leaning into him. Lily, standing before them with Robert's hand on one shoulder and Elena's on the other, looked up at the sky where the first stars were becoming visible. Look, she said, pointing. The wishing stars are coming out. Did you ever make your 1,000 origami swans? Robert asked, remembering her project from what seemed a lifetime ago. Lily shook her head. I got to 312, but then I realized I didn't need them anymore. Why not? Elena asked. Lily's answer was simple but profound, capturing the journey they had taken together from strangers to family, from fear to love, from isolation to connection. Because my wish already came true,